I'll just go like this. Bye.
Good evening and welcome to Let's Drone Out, episode 287. This evening we have with us a Curry Kitten.
Hello.
A Tony.
Bonjour.
NJ.
Hello, everyone.
Adam Juniper, who you may remember from earlier episodes.
Sorry.
And I'm Andrew /Frank. Jack may pop in at some point this evening, but probably not. We shall see. But he has replaced himself with Adam as someone who can talk a lot and is holding his head in his hands.
And has allowed his hair to roam free.
Which leads neatly onto the subject of... Speaking of head in hands.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very happy that you're coming on because people all over keep asking me pretty much every week. There's someone in the chat who says, "What about the new regulations?" And I ignore them and tell them to go away because they're long and there are many of them, and I can't be bothered to read them because I'm probably not going to go flying anytime soon anyway. So I'm not wasting my time reading them. But apparently,
on you.
Yeah,
I did the live stream on Friday, and people started asking me because you hadn't done it, and this is not good.
There was a moment when we were chatting in our little group chat, whenever it was a week or so ago, maybe longer than that, where I was unaware of the kind of situation regarding probing Frank into talking about this stuff. So I just came straight in and said, "Frank, you haven't talked about this for a while. Why don't you talk about this?" And there was, when you can see someone typing. It looked like he was typing for a good sort of 5-6 minutes, and I was like, well, this is going to be interesting. But instead the word "no" just popped up.
Do you think he'd thought about that really, really carefully?
Yeah. And then
took a few drafts.
Yeah, it did.
Dear. Yes. And Painless has been asked me to go on because he's been asked by people all the time. I think Winter Blue and the Quadratic people have been asked me to come on a few times. Other people have been asked to come on because I've seemed to have managed to make a name for myself for reading documents that are publicly available and then reading them to people. But I've given up on that because it's really, really quite painful. But apparently you've put yourself through the agony and know something about it, Adam.
I guess maybe not as much as this introduction implies. No. I was asked by someone to write a little bit about the rules as they might face somebody English speaking. For this is the problem where I write, is that they're more concerned with how Google might view things than necessarily, how our audience might used to have been in the good old days of print. So that means I have to consider the US, the UK, possibly Canada, and possibly Australia as being reasonable, interesting, and worthwhile places. And the thing is, though, the rules that's most, as you can see, is don't be an idiot. But they also largely mean don't have a drone that weighs more than 250 grams. It's just not worth it. Which is really disappointing because that didn't used to be the problem, did it? It used to be that if you could not be an idiot, you could risk a little bit more weight. And then I assume we're only talking about hours. As I don't know.
Let's make a start with ours.
Let's start with ours.
Maybe we'll grill this. We'll grill Blue Owl on some other regulations next week, maybe when she's not having a birthday.
Well, the 250 grams thing is nicely universal. There's that. In the US, though, it's ADSB is the exciting new development as of this month.
There's an acronym. Quick, what's it mean?
Oh God, what does it mean? It means having a little radio in your drone to scare off other drones or aircraft.
So it's radio conspicuity.
Yes,
yeah.
Electronic conspicuity. Yeah,
Thank
that's
you.
the one.
I thought I got away with it that time, Frank, but no, I hadn't said it long enough. It didn't work.
And it will share data from the what's it called? GPS, and it will in 60 days as of the end of December. Is that right? It becomes law, and then there's 18 months compliance time for the drone companies, and an additional 12 months compliance time. It's very.
Do you know if this is ADSB in or ADSB out? Because I know that there are quite a few drones
only out.
Okay, because there's quite a few that already have it in, so they pick up the ADSB signals from manned aircraft around them and say, oh, it's getting a bit close. Maybe you want to land or something. But I don't know about ADSB out,
which would be a lot. In would be a lot easier, wouldn't it? Because that's essentially sensible software. But out seems to me to be more likely to cause trouble, because it's going to be broadcasting a signal that could be, from somebody who's just bought a drone in a shop like Cloud9 or a real one.
Yeah, ADSB is what, like Flight Radar 24 and all of those kind of things use to pick up. So they're not actually radar tracking an aircraft. It's just that the aircraft has got the GPS on it and the barometer and everything else, and it spits that out over this ADSB frequency, just saying, I am this aircraft, I am at this location at this height, traveling at this speed. That is me.
Yeah.
And you can pick that up with it.
It's a far more modern and rational alternative to radar in the skies these days, isn't it? I mean, and you certainly wouldn't want drones firing radar all over the place. So I guess also the FAA forcing people to do it will mean that it's relatively inexpensive in 18 months' time.
So presumably the idea behind this is not so Flight Radar 24 and out you can watch people's drones. It's so any nearby full-size aircraft can say, oh, there's a drone down there. And also suggest that anything above 250 grams must have a GPS fitted as well as this ADSB malarkey.
Well, firstly, there's a zone. So the FAA will be able to define a list of places where it's not necessary, which is confusing. And I don't think they published the list at all.
Here are the rules, unless we decide not to, sort of thing.
Yeah, perhaps later. So I think it's going to be one of these things. It's in the same way that here we don't, we don't really know the classes yet in the rules. So I guess we should get onto our rules so we can talk about how stupid they are before we get too far into slacking off the American. The American one is obviously we really want this exciting new technology, and once we've got it, you'll be able to fly at night and fly over roads, so long as you don't hover over roads, as long as you just quickly get over a road. That sort of thing. With at the moment they have their Part 107, but I think that they're actually trying to make life easier for drone pilots, believe it or not. That is their stated goal. That does not feel like how ours are. So ours come from what is it? The idea that you can divide aircraft up into classes. And Andrew knows this, Frank knows this because he's been through it. Oh, you've all been through this, right?
I mean, there's the C0 to C1 to C2 to C3, and they all require the electronic conspicuity, which is where, when it was first kind of released a couple of years ago, when I was still reading this stuff, I came on here and was like, I'm not sure how they're expecting this to pan out, because at the moment, or at the time, the ADSB electronic conspicuity stuff didn't really exist in any accessible way. I mean, at the time there was still, probably a good 100 grams just for that unit, and it was costing hundreds of pounds.
I'm going to look like an idiot here, but I didn't actually see it in the draft I read of our rules. Is it definitely in there?
I'm pretty sure it was in the C0, C1, C2, all of those. I'm pretty sure it was in there, but it's for new. There is still kind of or at least there was.
If you were to get it, because of course nothing's actually got it yet. Is that the?
When I last read it, it was that there was a transition period where new things could be released without it. But I think that was up to like 2021.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's it's December 2021 transition period, and that's
so DJI could release a new Mavic whatever now, and it wouldn't need to have it. But if they released a new Mavic or whatever in a year's time, then it would have to have one of these classifications, and therefore it would need the electronic conspicuity. But they can continue selling all the models that they have on the market now for quite a while yet, and that'll be fine, and you'll be able to own them for even longer. So that's kind of how I understood it when I was reading it through a couple of years ago, when it was still being kind of confirmed. I don't know if you've read anything more recent that maybe changes that.
No, no, and I do often get things wrong though.
Just to interject quickly, guys, Clive is making a point here that if we have to carry them, then all general aviation should have to have it. Are we saying that drones are now going to be more regulated than actual full-size flying machines with people in them?
The kind of justification for that is that general aviation has for many, many, many years had see and avoid as their kind of safety principle. And the problem with the drones is that when they're small, like the ones that we use, they're hard to see. And so then that main principle, instead of see and avoid, becomes sense and avoid. And therefore that's where the electronic conspicuity comes in, is that because you can't see it in the sky or against the background of the ground or whatever, then you need to have it beaming out and letting you know that it's there even before you see it. That's the kind of idea there. Like, if you can't see a hot air balloon, then you've got bigger problems than you're looking at your ADSB system. Whereas if you can't see...
to read some accident reports say this air balloon came out of nowhere, Governor. I don't know where it came from.
Exactly. But if you don't see...
It's a camouflage balloon.
If you don't see a 250 quad when you're flying along the treetops in a helicopter, then that's kind of fair enough.
But not that you guys wrote the rules, but the obvious point is, like, we go to 400 feet in general aviation, 500 feet above. Therefore,
that I agree with. They're operating in very different, or they should be operating in very different airspaces, really. By the same token, if you've got a GA aircraft at 50 feet above tree line, anywhere other than on short final for a runway, then they've got bigger problems because they're about to hit stuff. So, I mean, there is the argument.
They're shedding engine housings all over people's housing estates.
Well, quite, yeah. In the same way, you've got that separation generally between commercial and general aviation, both in terms of space and in terms of height. I mean, a lot of GA aircraft won't get to the same ceilings as commercial aircraft will, but there's still there's reasons for separation for these things, and it's an interesting start. I mean, the other thing, if these systems are going to be integrated heavily into GA stuff, there's a much bigger cost to GA, right, in terms of either entirely new systems or updating existing systems to be able to read this information, or is that? Do you know anything about that?
Well, it's an existing technology that's just going to be there more of it, isn't it? But yeah, they'll have to start choosing to fit it. And I guess, how often do you do a retrofit of everything? It's quite an airliner that gets a lot of use, which admittedly that's none of them this year. do get a good looking over every few years, don't they? There's a lot of maintenance, and I'm sure fitting in a little extra boxes.
I think it's more the point for me is that anything in aviation, should it be the change of a single bolt, would then require not only an enormous amount of testing, paperwork, red tape.
Oh yeah.
Along with then the fitting, the downtime, the maintenance procedures, the instructions inside it. I mean, obviously, anything that changes of any kind in aviation is always hideously expensive. So how accommodating it will be from that side, I'm not so sure, which is why I think our side of things will get the majority of the bullying.
Well, I think we'll feel like that anyway, because we always do. But I think it's worth remembering that a lot of the changes in the rules actually provide a bit more freedom for some folk. So if you're getting the under 250 grams, the C0 category, or you're getting what used to be called the Mavic Mini, what is it? It's just called the Mini, isn't it? DJI Mini 2.
200 with 249 written on the side.
249 gram 4K aircraft is, at the moment at least, something that you can fly over people now under the new rules, rather than 50 meters, because that the CO category and A1 category of aircraft, A1 for risk, C1, C0, sorry. See, there are just too many categories, but C0 for class of thing, although it's not technically C0, of course, as we all know, because nothing has actually achieved any of the things. It's a C0 transitional, which everything will be for a little bit. But that is a category which you can now fly over people, and you can fly in town and over your garden, even if you live near people that you weren't allowed to do before. It can still make you a dick, and you can definitely piss off your neighbors, because you have to think about the things in the way that you might not have thought about them before, because before you could just go, oh, I'm not allowed to fly here, but now you might be able to I could go and take off in my garden, and then I imagine my paranoid 80-year-old old lady neighbor will be banging on the door, assuming that I am attacking, with some sort of evil robot. But at least it was my choice to do that. That's the difference. The problem is that as soon as I cross that 250 gram line, things start to change quite quickly in terms of how near, then you've got your 50 meters from people again, and then if you happen to have an Inspire, Leo,
get the beach ball.
Hi.
Hiya. Is it harder for the sound recording for your interjections to be worthwhile, Leo? Can you shut the door, please?
Bye-bye.
Can we get the beach ball, Leo? I know, it's so sad.
Headphones. Can you just take them off?
No, I can't take them off.
Why?
Leo, because they're going to fall out. They keep falling out anyway. I don't need to take them off.
But then I
Can you shut the door as well, please? Thank you. Sorry, anyway, 2 kilograms or 4 kilograms, if it's got its C approval score, is going to be quite a significant threshold, and it will give you 150 meters, and you won't be able to fly over industrial areas or the list basically includes anywhere you might consider flying other than in the middle of a huge estate of land that you personally own. So an Inspire is something you should sell quickly now.
Unrelated. Do you want to
Sorry.
plug your eBay listing for your Inspire?
Yeah, just keep meaning to type it up.
Hasn't Tony got one of those?
Tony
Does
just
Tony
bought
need a
one, yeah.
spare?
Bad news, Tony.
Tony's looking different.
Yeah, it's like looking in a mirror, really. I don't know what's going on there. All regs and no flight makes Tone Star one a dull boy. But while
anyway.
there's a slight break in conversation, there's some more positive news for anyone that hasn't tuned out. Wings and Wheels has been confirmed that it's planning to go ahead. So you know, that is good news.
I shall be there.
So that'll be an event. So it's North Weald. I'm just trying to find the date because I just realised I didn't have that one open. I think it's the 21st of June-ish, somewhere around there. I will confirm it when I can actually find it. Here we go. The 26th and 27th of June 2021, wingsandwheels.net. That's wings, letter N, wheels.net.
Like rock and roll.
Yeah.
Now, although Tony, who's decided to go off in a sulk, has posted, "I'm flying my Inspire, stop them." When you've got something like this where the rules seem difficult, does the authorities envisage the fact that people are just going to say, "Well, sod that. I'm just going to carry on and just not being an idiot and come get me, copper, if you can," or I'm just going to paint 249G on all my big quads and see if that works? Because will they have scales with them, or you know?
It is my perception that if you carry around your, if you do your registration and pay your £9 a year, which is obviously of some interest to pay for the much more than £9 a year it will have cost to set up this scheme, then if you waive that document at your average copper, if they catch you, you'll be fine. They're not. The weighing is not going to be I didn't say that out loud, by the way. but seriously,
you didn't read the disclaimer, so it's all down to Adam. It's his fault.
This is all just guessing. But if you were to show up, I love the disclaimer. If you had, say, a Mavic Air, which is what, 450 grams sort of territory, can't remember. It's been a few months. Do you remember summer? I did go outdoors at some point with one of the. Okay, so I do remember flying a Mavic Air 2 and it. Again, it's one of these things where you think, why would you need anything heavier ever? But it does weigh more than 250 grams. But it doesn't really feel much more than 250 grams, and I think it probably still weighs less than my phone. So I just feel like people aren't going to care for it. Like, bigness and weight is going to feel different to respect. Like, if you show you've put some effort into complying with rules, that's going to work better. And there are going to obviously be crossovers. There are going to be situations that if you're on national trust land, you can be confident that somebody's going to come and try and stop you because they've been extremely clear how they feel about anything newfangled and droney being flown over their land unless you pay for an expensive filming license, because that's how they make their money now.
Mm-hmm.
And also because it's an organisation largely run by old people who don't like new stuff.
Views expressed,
Sorry.
others
Views
not
expressed,
ours.
exactly.
Don't sue us. Yeah.
I'm sure I read somewhere that the 250 gram thing was more about its sort of danger to, wasn't there something to do with its danger at terminal velocity in terms of the damage it can do to a human?
Yeah, those are, yes, but I don't disagree in terms of them being actually like presenting a danger. It doesn't take a lot of weight to present a danger to a person, and I'm sure the rules have been devised quite rationally.
Well, what it's come from, and it's to do with that's where the speed limit came from as well, is a study about what you can have fall on your head and you get away with it, and that's basically 80 joules of an impact on your head is what you can kind of safely get away with for most people, which is a point that was made in the Air Accident Investigation Bureau report of the airspeeder that was released this week, where it's, you can, the 80 joules is the safe limit, and this impact at Goodwood a couple of years ago, where it just kind of disappeared up into the sky and flipped over and came back down again, was in the region of 20,000 joules. So they weren't particularly happy.
I'm
exactly a surprise. It's kind of like dropping a Ford Fiesta from some height, wasn't it, onto somebody?
I'm pretty sure my missus has a punch of over 80 joules, and I'm still here. So.
You have to measure it next time you upset it.
Well, yeah, just setting up this elaborate measuring rig, and then just stand there and say something upsetting. Yeah, I'll let you know how that goes.
But yeah, next time Jack comes on, we will go through a bit more of the airspeeder report. I want Jack to be here for that, mainly because of the photos of some of the soldering. I want his reaction caught on stream because it'll be necessary. But yeah, there we go.
Good trailer for something that we don't really know what's going to happen there. I assume that Jack is still normally surrounded by soldering equipment, that kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely.
So when they were talking about these ages ago, when they did the first sort of draft ISA, whatever, with these C0 things, they also talked about a speed limit in sort of meters per second. Is that anything in them now? Do we have a speed limit?
Yeah, it's still in there, and I've been struggling for the last few minutes to get the annoying thing to pop up. But one of you's probably got it on your screen, haven't you? But
all of us are refusing to look at them out of
on principle.
As I understand it, you are considered to be to be in the sort of lowest category, the safest category, the A1. There, you also have to come below a certain speed, but that speed can be chosen by the machine. So if you set your drone to safe mode or low speed or what have you, and leave it at that, that's fine. And if you then switch it to fast, and the fast pushes it into a new thing, yes, this chart, then once you've closed it, it's very hard to find again. Then, as I understand it, you don't need to be have the next step of ID or the A2C, and just because your machine can achieve the speed, it is only if you've switched it on in the settings, if that makes sense. Or it's usually a flight mode on a DJI drone, or I mean, I'm trying to imagine where you'd have a slow mode on something else.
Yeah, there's a big table of information. Yes.
So you can see here. My favorite thing on this chart for the classes is in the A1 section, which is the safe things. So the flight where you're not really going to need anything other than an operator ID. It can be privately built. It can be a legacy aircraft that was placed on the market before the 1st of January 2023. And it can be C0 toy or C0 not a toy. They've not come up with a better way of describing it than that for the legislation.
Well, I think that's probably because there is a whole load of regulations anyway about toys. Toys are like one of the most regulated products on the market, apart from like medical devices. So I'm not entirely surprised that there's going to be a whole thing about there. Probably also about like data protection of the user, i.e. the child, because that's a big thing at the moment as well. So I imagine that's all tied in there.
Yeah, and it's worth noting that the DJI Mavic Mini and Mini 2 are not a toy, but still down here paperwork-wise.
Therefore, the pilot has to be at least 12 to fly it solo.
Yeah. And to be 12, if you're going to be 12, your flyer ID has to be sought for you by your responsible adult. So there's an operator ID and a flyer ID, because the system of just having one person isn't annoying enough paperwork-wise. So I don't know if you've applied for your operator IDs. You obviously should have done by now, but you may recall that you were given you got yourself an operator ID, which I think lasts. What, is that the £9 a year one?
Yeah.
And
so
a different number, which is your flyer ID, which applies to an aircraft. Oh no, that's the weirdest thing about it, is the flyer ID still applies to multiple aircraft. You can still put that on more than one machine. You don't have to apply for a different flyer ID. It seems like it's going to be like a registration plate. So
the flyer ID is the one that you have to get every 3 or 4 years or something for having done the online test. That's like, should you fly into people's faces, or should you fly in the middle of a field in the middle of nowhere? Multiple question, pick the right one. And that gives you your flyer ID.
It's all right now. I can fly over their heads. As long as it's not into their faces, over their heads is fine.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And then it's the operator ID that you have to get every year by paying £9, and there's no test. For reasons that someone has decided.
It's because the FAA's system seemed relatively rational. So there was some level of competition to make it worse in terms of organisation. I think. I don't know. It just seems strange to have two separate IDs. But no, the real reason for it, I think, is that one is they want somebody, the one who owns it, to be old enough to be responsible enough to own it, and the person who's flying it to have been old enough to do a fairly straightforward test.
And to have read enough and understood what they're reading enough to answer very simple questions.
Yeah.
I think the good news is,
I think
this is not legal advice, but should you get arrested and taken to court for breaking the rules, you could present their rules as pretty good defense against, like, I don't understand this and nobody reasonably could expect me to, because it's all just bollocks written down.
Yeah. I didn't happen to have a set of scales with me in the field, and so this seemed like 249 grams and not 3 kilograms.
The man on the Clapham omnibus.
My biggest, the thing that winds me up, I think, the bit that grinds my gears, although most of it does, when it comes to this stuff, is, especially in aviation, there's so much is, so many rules are written as a result of incident. Something happens, it's very clear about what went wrong, it's investigated, it's dealt with, the rule is put in place, and then that hole is patched. And you end up with a shape of what a rule needs to be for the safety of everyone and what have you. Now, this kind of method, although, you know, in aviation, that's, as I've always said before, a lot of aviation's, the handbook's written in blood. A lot of that's been from bad things happening, that we've ended up with one of the safest forms of transportation in the world. We're dealing with something that requires so much speculation because there is such a lack of incident. And there seems to be so many people that don't necessarily know much about the subject that are writing the speculative rules for ideas about things that haven't happened yet. And it makes, and completely to the point that Curry was making, it makes for a set of rules which are so grey areas, with so much that are so open to interpretation at many angles, that you can kind of end up finding loopholes to place these in your favour that were designed to maybe stop you doing something that Hasn't happened yet. If you get where I'm going.
And the
It's
other
the literal implementation of that old aunt of yours saying you could have someone's eye out with that. The speculation that this bad things are going to happen, and you know, we can use the constant thing about, like, you know, how many people get killed every year with cricket balls or playing rugby and stuff like that, and these are
tea
things we
cozies.
encourage. Yes, tea cozies,
Tea
scarves,
cozies are very dangerous. Yeah.
socks. All these things have killed people every year. Drones, as far as we know, it's pretty safe, even though there's no rules about them. How can we make it safer so less people than zero get killed?
To go to sort of NJ's point, like air travel is incredibly safe, partly because of the fact it has a very similar legal system to the rest of society. You know, we look at what went wrong and we have a go at fixing it and all the rest of it, but mostly because the people who travel on planes are relatively well off and don't like dying. And rich people in general go to a lot of effort to stay alive. Right? They're much less bothered about the sort of people who drive around the Asda car park in the middle of the night in a beaten up old car doing donuts. So, you know, there's some elements of safety coming more from the fact that the sort of people involved are just a bit too boring to cause trouble or to go out of their way to save themselves. And I think there's a risk with drones that, you know, you're always going to have some people who want to have a bit of fun, aren't you? Because some of them are kids, because they are quite appealing to kids.
Well, I guess it's
Leo's very excited by the Wooden Wonder still, even though that's not been touched or been given its fourth motor back for a very long time.
I mean, to your point, Adam, in the same way we assume that everyone, you know, outside our houses is sticking exactly to the speed limit. Very well defined road rules that are out there.
Yeah, and that's the other point. It's like, what's the point in having rules? Like, either it's so that you can enforce it, or so that it tells people what they should be doing. And at the moment, like, that's another reason why I've not bothered reading them for a while, is because, you know, they were all kind of coming to a conclusion. There was going to be like one document, these are the rules, this is where everything is. And, you know, I was wanting to make sure that, you know, we all knew where that was going and could voice concerns as that was kind of being developed. But now it's kind of got to that point, but it's so long and complicated because it's got all the little edge cases everywhere. And they've made it, I feel, maybe a bit more complicated than it needs to be. They've also then had to write a load of documents that also explain it. And so then you still got, if you look at the description,
terribly done.
Yes.
Which are terrible.
And
Sorry.
Inconsistent and generally unhelpful. And if you look in the description again, there's a set of links there which are a subset of all the various links that are now describing the new rules. And so they've replaced like 3 documents that were, you know, long and painful with one document that's long and painful, and lots of other documents that don't really match up very well. So,
also, when the process started, we were at least going to get one piece of paper that let us fly anywhere in Europe when we were on holiday, that kind of thing. As well.
Okay, this is very dangerous.
Sorry, I'm not going to get too far down this road. Suffice to say that now I still have to pay for the document, but it doesn't do me any use when I'm abroad.
Now, occasionally there are rules that are brought in that just sort of seek to make people stop breaking some of the rules so badly. For example, according to the 2 speed awareness course I've done for the car, just to show how well it sinks in, both times I'm told that whenever there's a 20-mile-an-hour limit, the authorities aren't expecting people to stick to 20, but they expect them to be under 30, which is going to cut down on deaths, because under 30 is basically a non-death thing. So I suppose the theory is there that they're just introducing these rules just to make people give up in despair.
But your 86 was considered inappropriate?
What?
Well, you had to get on the course. You're saying that you wouldn't have been on, you were doing more than 20, right?
Oh no,
possibly more than 30.
You have to be on a 30 limit. I was doing 30 something.
Wow.
If you break it too much, then they won't put you on the speed awareness course. They'll just fine you.
Yeah, which is what they really want to do, presumably.
Well, it would be less hassle just to pay the fine.
That's how most people feel about those.
Yeah.
I must say that driving fines against the CAA fine. The CAA fines seem to be £1,000 or £5,000. Is that right? Or is that the FAA ones? I've certainly seen some really big numbers from different aviation authorities researching this.
They usually mean it when they put their fines down.
Yeah, well, that's what I was thinking. That they're a lot higher than you get for being a bit quick on the road or running over a child or anything. Just testing to see if you're still listening.
Fraser in the chat has said, all this talk and cooking is entertaining and cathartic, but ultimately pointless. Write to your MP, ! And CC in Grant Shapps. Shapps G.
Is Grant Shapps your MP? How disappointing for you.
No, he's the Minister for Transport, isn't he? So therefore, you can see him in.
It's either a master. I'm not sure if it is a master stroke. Actually, is the bit that you're complaining about is the lack of clarity or definition of the rules, and that's a very hard thing to complain about because you're not specifically complaining about a rule. You're just complaining that you don't know what it means.
No, it's all right. I can work. I can tell you. We can go and page our way through all of the problem is that it means a lot. Right, that there are so many individual cases. It would be a lot easier to have the rules laid out in a much clearer set of tiers. I mean, one solution that would be that would make life easier straight away would be to remove the temporary cases from the chart.
Or the kind of by 2022, 2023. Transition
and put that in a separate table and say this is true now, this will be true then. Just that two separate headings, so you can look at one, and then if you're really interested in thinking about the future, you can look at the other one. Or better still, not set a set of rules that you're going to change 2 years later for no good reason.
I don't know. How are they expecting to earn their pay if they don't keep changing the rules? If you've got a team of people to change rules, you've got to keep them busy.
I know. But it just feels like someone in the current lawmaking hierarchies has sort of gone, oh, technology changes, doesn't it? So we should and laws take quite a while to change, and it's a real faff. So we'll make more effort once, and then they'll be fine for a while. We'll have the law ready.
I think this was kind of how it changed, was that basically kind of the original ANO was just saying, don't fly unsafely. If you fly unsafely, we'll tell you off. And then they released all the other documents that weren't regulations, but were just guidelines of like, this is how to fly safely in these for a glider, for a model aircraft, for whatever else. And now they've tried to kind of make that into law so that they can actually, enforce it a bit better, because it's quite hard to enforce an overall. This is the rule that's very airy fairy, but this is the guidance that's not a law. And now they're trying to kind of make the law more specific, but then you end up with that issue of you having to have every little edge case, or they just get rid of the edge cases and just let people do some things and not have everything in there.
It seems like you could probably rationalize it all with just the 250 gram line, or maybe even knock that up to 500 grams and say anything below that, fine, fly it around the garden, whatever. Anything above that, do an exam. Leave it at that, a proper exam, like where they've checked, as opposed to
I don't think Tony would be happy with that. I don't know. I think I would have thought maybe something like if it could impart, if they did go for the 80 joules, to say if there's a reasonable chance of this imparting 80 joules to a human being, then don't do it. And then it either has to be small or far away. Might take some explaining, but this one is small, that one is far away, and that's how it works. But
I still don't get it, Ted.
But isn't a lot of this also supposed to have into consideration risk assessment? Is that a fair thing to say? Of which there really isn't.
I mean that's the seems to be the way they've structured it to try and make it risk assessy too. So that's the other thing that the table that we were looking at earlier with the C0 not a toy, C0 toy, C1, C2, C3, and interim versions, and C4.
Explosive
has I know, I know, which is a shame. But
it's the last category you want to give a drone, is it? Really?
I know, and it's the really big one.
This is my C4 drone running cover.
And then you look a bit closer, and A1, A2, A3 are only the open category. They're like those of us who haven't done too many tests or what have you. Then you've got the specific.
Where
you've got two other categories actually, haven't you, from the CAA? One of which you need the new what's it called now? Not PFCO. But there's an exam for an actual exam with a test, and the next category, just a bit like ring the CAA, ask nicely. They've not even really sorted out the rules so far as they but things where you're going to fly.
Isn't the one in the middle where they've got basically some template risk assessments, and you just have to fill in the template, and then they go, yes, we've written these, so therefore they're fine, and if you sign it, then it's good. And then the other one is for like when you're coming up with something that no one's ever seen before, and therefore it doesn't fit the templates, then you have to write your own one from scratch, which is what kind of, I think, for basically part of the PFCO has been, right, is that you have to write your operation manual.
Yeah, no, it's actually a much better way of doing it than the PFCO, because of the template risk assessments, and because there are only really two of them. So long as you're doing that, they've saved you and you don't have to do the operations manual anymore.
Because I think they got bored of reading one's operations manual that was mostly the same but slightly different. And now they've just published like this. Okay, fine. Stop making us read them. Here's a standard one.
Because everyone was getting them for free. Everyone was getting them for free anyway from their, wherever they did the exam. Yeah.
The thing is, for the risk assessment as well, and if every risk assessment I've ever looked at usually has a fairly strong data point by which to start things off in terms of saying this has happened and this has happened, and that's very much part of the risk assessment moving forward. But that's the point. There's no real data point there in the first place, or one very much in the favour of drones.
I see what you mean, because usually you're doing it by there's one accident every 30,000 flights or whatever.
Right, it's a figure that's data that's part of it. I think it's just that never seems to get much of a mention, does it?
No, they don't like to think about it like that. No, they'd much rather think about it in terms of the things they understand, the 50 meters from a human, or above something expensive like a human.
Then again, they could come back and say, we've watched 1,000 YouTube videos, and on average, people crash 4 times per battery. So these are death traps.
That is a reasonable assessment. One of the things that is sort of nice and is worthy of praise is that they've gone out of their way to remove the commercial versus hobbyist distinction in the rules, which I sort of think is nice, because it means that anyone who is doing it as a hobby has like some idea of what they're doing, and is potentially, you know, going to get themselves the A2 CFC level, which you can get for about 50 quid. Can do a few cheap jobs, whereas in the past you'd have had to do a £1,000 PFCO and renew it all the time, and also explain for no good reason what the work was commercial. Whereas if you just pretended it wasn't commercial, you wouldn't have to do your PFCO, and you could get away with it a bit, which didn't seem very fair.
Yeah.
In the US at the moment, for example, if you put something up on your YouTube channel and the FAA see it, and you earn $0.01 in royalties, that trips you into the commercial section, and then you have to go and sit your exam. Again, they're trying to get out of it, but you'd have to go and sit your exam at the bloody airport.
Yeah, I think the idea was that you're more likely to push it beyond where you really should be if there's money on the line. If someone's gonna pay you £250 for getting this bit of video, you're more likely to stay up there even as the winds start picking up and it starts raining and the crowd gets a bit closer and a child wanders by and everything else. Whereas if you've not got £250 on the line, when it starts getting a bit breezy, then you probably more likely to just land it and not risk it.
I've just found your price on human life
true.
there, Andrew.
Well, you know, I think that was the reasoning. Meh.
Yeah, I don't dispute that was the reasoning, but it always seemed very unfair, because it made it much harder to break out, you know, and we're all meant to be breaking out these days.
Yeah, I think also you don't want to.
That did the PIF go had more reason to really get the money, because they had to bring it in to keep renewing it and write their silly manuals and stuff.
Yeah, I think it did also make it quite clear with the number of people who have like smashed up a matrice in the rain because they didn't really know what they were doing. I think it kind of made it quite clear that it wasn't the be all and end all, and the massive problem there.
It is hard to say no to someone when they're paying, but you can do it. Like I have been in the situation where you're like, yes, but it's raining, and I'm sorry we're all here, but you don't want any rain in the shot, and I don't want it to fall out of the sky, so we're just going to wait.
Interesting. Did they ever say stuff like, "We can take the rain off in post, carry on," or something like that?
Well, yeah, no, I've not met anyone who can do that yet, but yeah, if they could, that would be fantastic. I don't think it's a worthwhile task anymore. I do think that. Sorry, go on.
No, where was I going with this? I still think that the bigger problem, which it's just kind of been accepted and a little bit forgotten about, and I think this is the source of frustration maybe for a lot of people in our world, is it feels like we're not really that represented in what we do with drones versus even the kind of thing that you see sort of visualized in rule books as they're being written and how they're talked about. The kind of, even then you're seeing a very vague understanding from the rule writers of what these things are, but it's very much the idea of that it's sort of a phantom thing with a camera under it is kind of the extent of the specification for the market they're trying to write these rules around, as opposed to really knowing all the different sectors and what they do, and the fact that a lot of guys that fly our drones are nowhere near the heights that the phantoms are sitting when they're going up, or any of these drones are operating at commercial levels. We're at treetop height or lower. If you're racing gates, you're 3 feet off at most. You know, it's the total.
There's nothing fun to avoid up there.
Well, that is also the thing. Is like then you end up with, like, there is the Article 16, which is the kind of extra permissions for the members of the model flying associations in the UK, and in there is a bit about if you're FPV racing and you're not going up above 50 meters above the ground level, and you've got this and you've got that, then you can fly without worrying about how many spotters you've got or something. But this is why then there's just another document to cover everything as well. So there's and then you have to dig through a load of stuff about control line and everything else to find that bit about the FPV racing, which it's a lot. It's a lot to read.
It's disheartening.
Yeah, that's not going away either, is it? I mean, it's in a way, I still think it's nice that it's there because it's not. It's relatively unique to this country. I think there are a lot of places that don't bother caring at all about people who do FPV, or they just know that everyone who does FPV is not going to follow rules. I still, right from the start, my experience of flying was, my thing that got me interested was the parrot in some news about what was happening at the Las Vegas gadget show. But it was me, but I met you guys through that because at some point, because of the way things are here, you meet up with people doing more interesting stuff. If what Jack does can be considered interesting.
I think everyone that's here, presumably at some point or another, has found Jack interesting. I don't think we'd be here otherwise. But in the last...
It's good to see in the comments. I was just going to say that it's something that we've sort of probed. I know as you say, Frank, we've probed you several times over the last few weeks over this. And we had this coming where we would have an LDO where we talk about this in sort of greater depth. But I mean, you can see from the comments, this is there's a lot of strong opinions in here and a lot of valid stuff being said. And it's people are investing the time into trying to sift through a lot of it. So I just think it's going to take a while, isn't it? We're years away from any kind of refinement on a lot of this. So I mean, what is the takeaway? Just comply with the paperwork, and it sort of goes back to what you're saying, Adam. When you meet a cop that probably knows far less than you do about the rules, you show them a bit of paper and say, I'm not the guy who does stupid things with it. I know what I'm doing. Here's a bit of paper. It shows you that I'm making every effort to comply. You'll probably be fine, right?
Yeah. And
as Jack's in the chat.
As has been said in the chat quite a bit, do your own kind of informal internal risk assessment, as you have been doing for however long that you've been flying, probably, as you do with everything. It's like, what is there? What could go wrong? Is this worth the risk? Yeah, it's worth the risk. I'll do it.
I mean,
just
we
that
always
kind
do.
of common sense.
You always will. You sort of instinctively do it. It's kind of depressing that you have to write it down.
But if you've got that, then unless you've done something to offend the police officer, then they'll probably be all right with agreeing with you on that, I'm sure. Most of the time.
Well, that's that
sadly
on the officer.
Sadly, it's at the point where you'll probably be able to have a much more sensible conversation with a policeman about this and the bit of paper that you have than you will with most of the general public. That's now sadly the way things work. As you've been doing this long enough, which I know you all have, and most of our listeners, there was a time where it was absolutely the general public who'd come up in awe and say, what are you doing? That looks amazing. And the media we are where we are. Let's not go down that road, but we now have a very different stigma attached to what we do, and that's also got to be part of when you think about where you're flying, and you're representing we're representing something that's very much on the back foot, which is, it's sad, but this is where we are, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And a nice side of that is the police are often quite not only interested in things, police
Yeah,
do seem to be
inquisitive.
people who are quite good at that, but they're also sort of acutely aware of when people are putting bad law or bad rule, because they don't like it because it's bad news for them. So, if you seem to understand and everyone's having a sensible discussion about risk and stuff, you'll usually find that sort of thing ends quite nicely. Unless the policeman has certain biases or what have you.
Oh yeah.
I'm expecting a beach ball to come flying through and hit you straight in the face at any second.
Well, that door's still shut at the moment.
But speaking of beach balls, Curry, before we go, do you want to give us a very brief bit of note on what you've been up to on your simulator?
The sim has the game in it, which has a beach ball. You have to knock it around 10 levels and get it in the goal. So far, Caroline hates it, but other people don't hate it so much. It depends if you're into games or not. It is available as a Steam beta. If you've already got the Steam version, you can just join the beta and download it and give it a go. And if you can let me know how you find it, that will be helpful, because I haven't quite finished it. I wanted to just make sure people liked it. I like it, but I wrote it, so I would like it. So that's not a very good point of view. So please try it if you can. Thank you.
One final little thing as well. I did receive in the post a prototype, not for resale, and it is an Archon V3, which I'm very excited to get together. So
I do like the fact he's drawn in the logo.
Yeah,
yeah.
Prototype packaging as well. Yeah.
I like
the
the
official packaging.
vacuum packed. Looks like a kind of fillet of fish.
Yes.
Thing.
Yeah, exactly. You can put it straight in the fridge; it will keep for years. So yeah, that will be hopefully getting a build very soon. But yeah, that's us at the hour, I think. Adam, thank you so much for coming on and chatting with us about that. It's good to get a update on things.
Well, I apologise for a sort of hit and miss arrangement.
I feel like you need to round off with the old Crime Watch thing and say, please, people, don't have nightmares. It's these are rules, but just don't be a dick and you'll be all right.
That is how I rounded off the 2,500 words I was compelled to write on this subject. Clearly, not all of it stuck in my head.
Thank you for joining us, and thank you everyone for listening. Thank you as well to our patrons who make all this possible and get it all edited and up on the podcast for all the people that maybe have listened to the first 5 for tuning out. So tonight we have had Curry Kitten.
Goodbye.
We have had NJ.
Take care, guys.
We have had Adam.
Evening all.
We've had Tony, but I think he died.
We put him off, didn't we?
I have been Frank. So join us again next week, where hopefully we'll be showing Jam some triggering images for him. So tune in for that. Bye.